Meltdown. The possibility of a meltdown is definitely a disadvantage of nuclear power. If we look back to the power plant design, we see that control rods have to be inserted or removed to get the right temperature in the reactor vessel. What if someone makes a mistake or a sensor fails and too many rods come out or some other system fails? The reactor could heat up to the temperature inside the sun. It's called a meltdown because the temperature would be so high that everything would melt. The heat itself would be bad enough, but there's a much bigger danger. It turns out that the nuclear fuel rods, and especially the nuclear waste left behind, is highly radioactive. So radioactive that if the meltdown released the spent fuel, it could hurt anybody who is nearby. Because of the meltdown risk, nuclear reactors are made with a lot of remote control devices and many layers of safety procedures. There have been 3 famous meltdowns. The first was at 3 Mile Island reactor in Pennsylvania. It partially melted down. It happened right after the famous movie depicting a meltdown had come out in the theaters, The China Syndrome. 3 Mile Island incident occurred because a water valve stuck open, but the people running the reactor thought it was closed. They had a critical backup system down for repair. They caught their mistake, but not before a quarter of the reaction vessel melted. Luckily, the containment structure had held, and no radioactive waste was released to the environment. Since this event in 1979, with improved safety procedures, there has not been a meltdown or serious threat of one in any of the hundreds of nuclear reactors operating in the United States. But in 1986, one happened. It was the Chernobyl reactor in the country Ukraine and was operated by the Russian-controlled government known as the USSR. With less money, the USSR designed the Chernobyl reactor to maximize power output at the expense of safety features. As with 3 Mile Island, there was a mechanical failure, but there was no room for air. The reaction vessel heated up too quickly for the workers to put in the control rods to cool it down. When they did get the control rods in, the rods all burned up. With no way to cool the reactor, temperatures went out of control, a meltdown. What happened next is exactly what we fear could happen at any nuclear reactor. With temperatures soaring, things didn't just melt. Heated high enough, they boiled. The gas pressure built up in the containment vessel until the whole building blew up. At that point, very high amounts of radioactive waste from the fuel rods flew miles in every direction around the plant. But it didn't stop there. The radioactive gas from the reactor was ejected high in the air and was blown to great distances by the trade winds. Hardest hit besides Ukraine was the neighboring country Belarus. Not only was Belarus downwind of the meltdown, but it rained, bringing the radioactivity down on the country. Europe also suffered what's known as radioactive fallout. It was even detected in the US as it spread around the globe. The major lasting effects were in Ukraine and Belarus. Around the plant for 20 miles, even today, the radioactivity is so high that nobody is allowed to live there. Belarus has seen many health problems in their population attributed to the meltdown. The third famous meltdown happened in 2011 in Japan. Remember, Japan 60 years earlier had suffered enormously from the use of nuclear fission, but they had built a modern, successful, and very safe nuclear industry since then. Their reactors could withstand human error, earthquakes, which are actually common in Japan, and even tsunamis, giant waves generated by earthquakes at sea. So nobody saw it coming. It started with an earthquake off the coast. A tsunami wave hit the northeast coast and raced inland, causing terrible destruction as far as 50 miles inland. The Fukushima nuclear reactor was in the way, but had been designed to withstand tsunamis. It had a 20-foot high earth wall around the entire plant. Unfortunately, the tsunami wave was higher than the wall. It flooded the plant. All the power to operate the plant was lost, and everybody fled for their lives. The evidence of the meltdown came when a reactor containment vessel exploded, sending a reactive cloud up into the trade winds and around the world. Like Chernobyl, there is today a 20-mile safety zone around the plant where nobody can live. Other radioactive fallout largely went out to sea, which has made it a little less of a human tragedy. And the country of Japan has to deal with a second national disaster handed to them by nuclear fission.